Once again, I'm Efe Diana Muriuki Maina, the CEO of ICIFA, and I'd like to start us off with our first speaker. He is Efe Johnson Nderi. I'll request if his profile can be projected so that we can just have a look at the importance of him being part of this panel. So do we have his profile? But I mentioned he is the Manager, Corporate Finance and Advisory, ABC Capital Limited, and I think he's a very passionate member of ICIFA, especially when it comes to policy matters. So there we have Efe Johnson's profile, and just looking at his contributions in terms of transaction advisory, he has been very instrumental in that, and he has also been a media commentator on investment, financial and economic issues. And for those who have followed him can say truly he's very passionate about investment, finance, economics, and all the issues that of course are expected to build this great nation of Kenya. So Efe Johnson, please go ahead. I think he prefers being called Efe Nderi. Take it away with the first session. Thank you. Well, I think he might have dropped off.
Okay.
Or if Margaret, you can start us off as we. I think he might have just stepped out briefly. But if Margaret, you can start off the session. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diana, you didn't introduce me for welcoming us here, and I'm happy to be here to discuss the finance bill. I'm looking forward to having a very interactive discussion. And I'm passionate about the bill. I'm passionate about the effects that it's going to have in our country. I want to actually point out the various taxes that are in the bill. So I will go straight to my presentation. So allow me to share. So I'm not able. First, I'm starting with a backdrop or the introduction of why the bill has been tabled into Parliament. And the government wishes to increase its revenue by seeking to amend the 2023 bill on various laws relating to the taxes and duties, with the aim of increasing government revenues to fund the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. So to meet the agenda, the government has budgeted Kenya shillings to about 3.6 trillion. The government intends to mobilize domestic revenues of Kenya shillings 2.9 trillion. This means it will have a deficit of about 768.2. So there's going to be a finance gap. And what does this mean? It means that the government has to source for additional sources to meet its requirements. So at the same time, the government is faced with rapidly depreciating shilling, deteriorating balance of payments position, inflationary pressures, along running drought, which is wrecking the agricultural sector, the payment of interest for government loans. So the government has therefore employed some physical tools of taxation by tabling the 2023 bill to achieve its macroeconomic transformation agenda of stabilizing the economy and also collect additional revenues to reduce the budget deficit. So this, the bill is going to seek also to have additional funds, which means government will reduce its borrowing needs. So the government has tried to have a coordinated fiscal and monetary policy to achieve its economic transformation agenda. So the tax measures that the government has proposed in the bill are expected to generate an additional revenue of about 289.3 billion. That is going to stimulate the country's economic growth. And of course, with that, we're going to have our GDP rising to about 6.1%. So in my presentation, I have some notable, just a few, because the finance bill is very huge in itself. I've just picked a few of some notable taxes, and these taxes include a 35% band for employees earning above 500 per month or shillings 6 million per year. So the bill has proposed to meet more from high-income earners by introducing a new pay-as-you-earn tax band, whose gross monthly income sits, as I've mentioned earlier, at about 6 million annually. So what's the implication of this? So the bill will have the implication of lifting the pay-as-you-earn nettings from high-income earners, while having the opposite effect of bringing down the individual's net take-home. So I've borrowed something from the bill, and this is how it's going to be. So the finance bill proposes to have a pay tax band of, that's how it's going to be. On every 288 per annum, we'll have a 10%. So as you reach to 6 million, you can see there we have 35%. Then the other thing that the bill has picked is 3% housing levy deductions. Though these ones we were told we had the president the other day saying that the bill, that actually this is not, it's not a tax, but it's going to be a saving. So the bill, proposes to introduce that new statutory deductions into the National Housing Development Fund, which is going to be a 3% on gross earnings. So the new statutory deductions is expected to further eat into employees' net take home. So the housing ministry is expected to create a criteria for persons qualifying for affordable housing and who will employ their deductions to fund their home quest. So people who will fail or who will fail to fall, people who will not fall into the criteria or will receive a reimbursement at the end of 7 years, or maybe choose to pass the benefit to somebody else. And it has two segments. There's the social housing and there is also affordable housing. So the social housing targets those who are low income, especially those ones from the informal settlements, and they will pay by paying rent on mortgage. So the house will be surrendered to those tenants to full own them, those ones who are in the informal sectors. Then on affordable housing, it will be a scramble for who is in need and who is in need of a mortgage. Then the other notable area is a reduction in the corporate tax rate applicable to branches from 37.5% to 30%. So what has been happening in the past is that we've had non-resident corporations or branches pay a corporate tax of have been paying for a long time a corporate tax of 37.5%, but now it has gone down to the proposed bill is taking it down to 30%. So this is aimed at promoting equality among residents and non-resident companies, and at the same time also to encourage more companies to come and invest in Kenya, so that also the government can expand, we can have economic growth. So related to that bill, the proposal to tax, also there's going to be tax on repatriated profits. So what does this mean? It means that if you are a non-resident company and you're in Kenya, it means that any profit that you're taking back to your country is going to be charged some profits. They're going to charge some amount on that profit that you're repatriating to your country. Then we have also something else that is to note on the bill is the TOT, the turnover tax. So the bill proposes to increase the gross sales tax from 1% to 3%, while roping in more micro businesses to the tax net by lowering the entry point to cover businesses with a turnover of 500,000 annually from the previous 1 million. So it means that now the bracket has been widened. Then at the same time, the upper band has meanwhile moved from 50 million to 15 million at the same time, now putting many people into the bracket. So that means that businesses with a turnover of 15 million and paying taxes on profits will have to pay an income tax rate at the rate of, or a corporate tax rate at 30%. So what is the effect? The effect of the tax will mean more micro businesses will now be subjected to taxations from the basket of the TOT. So increasing from the higher tax to the increasing from the higher tax rate, yeah. So the other thing which is notable is the gains made by the partnerships and now are subject to capital gain tax. And you know very well in our country, capital gain tax was never taxed. And capital gain tax is taxed on if you inherit a property or if you gotten a property that you've inherited, then it means that you'll also pay tax. And if you're in partnership with what? If you're in partnership with some people, it means that the growth in that partnership will also be subjected to some tax. So the bill proposes to bring to the fold the CGT gains on the transfer of property situated in Kenya that is owned by the partnerships. So the partnership were previously exempt from the tax. So the bill seeks to tax the gains made on the transfers of the qualifying properties. So something else of note is the shares that are given to employees in lieu of cash emoluments by the startups. So the bill proposes to tax the benefits from shares received by employees in lieu of cash emoluments from an eligible startup. So the taxable benefit shall be deferred and taxed within 30 days or earlier. So earlier of the expiry of 5 years from the end of the 5 year of the award of the shares, earlier of the disposal of the shares by the employee, or earlier of the date the employee ceases to be an employee of the eligible startup. So here, what does the bill seek? The bill seeks to encourage startups to allow employees to benefit from the growth of the company by issuing employees with shares. So this is a crucial proposal as it's going to eliminate the immediate need to finance salaries and allow employees to benefit from the growth of the company. So another something else that has been charged by the bill is the relief for contribution to a post-retirement medical fund. So the bill proposes to introduce a relief on contributions made by a resident person towards the retirement of the medical fund. So the value of the proposed relief is 15% of the contributions, capped to 60,000 per annum. So the effect is, or the reason why it's being proposed is to encourage individuals to take up post-retirement medical schemes to safeguard against increasing medical costs in their post-employment years. So another notable thing in the bill is the VAT, the value added tax, at a standard rate of 16 on petroleum products. And it's going to tax 16% on petroleum products, and it's going to exclude liquid petroleum and gas. So the proposal is likely to impact the prices of the transportation and production of goods increasing. And of course, this means that it's going to have some inflationary pressure in the economy. So at the same time, it is going to exempt the LGP, the liquid petroleum, from VAT. Initially, the VAT actually was introduced on the LPG was introduced in the year 2020 in the Act, but then I think it was shelved because of the high cost of living then, I think because of COVID. Then the Act in 2020 implemented the LPG rate at a reduced rate of 8% instead of 16%. So Right now, the LPG, which is a good thing for households, it means that households will not pay VAT or any tax on liquid petroleum gas. So by exempting them, it is expected that it is going to impact on households' costs, while at the same time positively impacting on the climate. Though there is an argument that I've heard out there that the VAT incurred by the supplier of LPG will become costly and it might be passed again to the consumers, actually negating the much needed relief. So exported services, so it means that if you have any services that you're exporting, it means that you'll be exempted from VAT, which is a good welcome and a good move, because this is encouraging industries and at the same time encouraging small businesses to actually manufacture for export. And then something else to note in the bill is the introduction of the tax on digital assets. So this is actually a new tax on digital assets, and it is proposed at the rate of 3%, and it's going to be applicable to income derived from the transfer or exchange of digital assets. And the digital asset is anything that is tangible, like cryptocurrencies, token codes, numbers held in your digital platform generated through cryptographic, providing a digital representation of value exchange with or without consideration that can be transferred, are stored or exchanged electronically, the non-fungible token or any other token by whatever name that they are going to be called there. So all those ones will include the digital assets, which the government has proposed, or the bill is proposing to tax 3% on those ones. So any money that we hold on our wallets in regards to maybe cryptocurrency or other tokens is going to be subjected to some tax of 3%. So another thing that also of importance is the charge of 15% withholding tax on digital content monetization. This includes offering payment for entertainment, social, artistic, education, or anything materially electronically through any medium or channel. And of course, the mediums like websites, website advertisement, social media platforms, brand sponsorship, affiliate marketing, subscription services, merchandise sales, licensing content, including photography, music, or user-owned projects, crowdfunding for specific goals, for content creation. All those ones will be subjected to a 15% withholding tax. So the implication on this is to bring into the tax net digital content developers or influencers in the wake of their mushrooming. We very know that it's quite lucrative and it's mushrooming, and every day there is something new that is coming up, which is also good for innovation for our country. Then something else to note in the bill is a monthly rental income. So the bill proposes to reduce the rate of monthly rental income from 10% to 7.5%. So it's not all just about we are being taxed and the taxes have gone very high. There are some also very good things to note in the bill, very good things to note in that bill, which I have not also captured here. So the rate has been reduced to encourage tax compliance of property owners and to boost the government's revenue collection. Then something else is withholding tax on sales. Withholding tax on sales promotion, marketing, and advertising services. So the introduction of withholding tax on sales, promoting, and advertising advertisement paid to residents person in excess of Kenya shillings 24,000 per month at the rate of 5% of the gross amount. So what does this mean? That marketing and advertisement services have remained, what actually was happening before is that the marketing and advertisement services had remained, were out of the scope of the withholding tax. And of course, these guys enjoyed because they did all their things and they actually got their money in full without any taxes. So now the bill has proposed that it's going to tax the withholding tax on sales promotion in marketing and advertising services. And also in the bill itself, they've actually clarified what such payments entail and what such payments entail. And that's why it's subjecting it to withholding tax of 5%. Then something else which is notable in the bill is no withholding tax on payments made by human vaccine manufacturers. So the bill proposes to exempt from withholding tax the following payments made by human vaccine manufacturers. This is actually to encourage even our local people, our Cambry and all that and individuals to do what to get into discovering vaccines and other things. And the reason is because royalties are paid to the non-resident persons and interest is paid to the resident persons or non-resident persons. So the bill proposes to exempt from withholding tax the following payments made by human vaccine manufacturers because they are paid royalties. And this is basically to encourage the investments in vaccine manufacturing, which is heavily reliant on intellectual. It's actually an intellectual property, which now the bill has proposed that it's going to be exempted from payment of withholding tax. So then the government has also tried to have a coordinated physical, just from the bill itself, a coordinated physical policy and monetary policy to achieve its economic transformation development agenda by adjusting the various monetary variables. And we have seen what the central bank aimed to influence money supply and interest rates in the country, which in turn has an impact on the inflation. And on inflation, and we have also seen it has used exchange rate policy to extend some control inflation. And also from the central bank communications, through their communication, the central bank is using its communication strategies on the action it intends to take to achieve both physical and monetary policy. In this way, the central bank is shaping the public to influence what it wants actually the market to expect regarding future inflation by providing clear and consistent guidance on their inflation targets and expectations. I think, let me stop here, Diana, because I think I can see now it's already 6 o'clock and I think my colleagues also need to touch on various issues. Kindly, if you allow me, because I'm seeing it's already 6 o'clock, so I have actually taken more than the time that I should have taken. But I would be happy to answer any questions and even to continue.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret, for that comprehensive presentation. And apologies, we didn't introduce you because we were expecting Nderi, but because we had introduced Nderi, Nderi, we can look at Margaret's profile briefly.
What?
I'm saying we can look at your profile briefly because we had already looked at Nderi's. And for the sake of time, I'll request Nderi, if you're with us, please proceed to make your presentation as briefly as possible. Is Nderi on board? Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can hear you. Hi Diana.
Hi,
FA
you're
Diana,
welcome.
sorry.
It's
Apologies,
okay.
my internet is a bit choppy today, but let me try and see what I can do with regards to the presentation. Just give me a second. Mine is brief because I intend to deal with the philosophical aspects of everything, and to do that, I want to work with I'd prefer to work with from a background first. Just give me a second. I'm trying to share. Cool. Now I understand. I learned. I think it's an advanced version.
It's not okay.
All right. So this is basically what we are looking at, right? In the macros, we are looking at 4.7% economic growth year on year. I think that's just been released. Inflation, it's at 7.9%. For me, this is a bit high. Ideal inflation, in fact, for advanced countries, ideal inflation is about 3%. We are at 7.9%. That's typically very punitive for savers and for manufacturers and other producers. If you look at the chart on your left, money supply has been tightening, but this is up until sometime in November. But if you look at subsequent year-on-year changes in money supply, you'll find that it's actually been increasing to accommodate government spending to keep interest rates low. But as you can see from the 2 and 10 years, the trends have been upwards in terms of interest rates, and I think if you talk to bond dealers right now, they'll be telling you rates for anything above 5 years is 15% perhaps and over. I think the 3 year, there was a 3 year that was floated, and it attracted, I think, 14.3. So it sort of validates that kind of data. And then if you look at the fiscal policy, this is what now sets the trend. You can see up until 2008, fiscal balance was very, very slight negatives. But then there's a point it reached and it started trending higher and higher negative amounts. So we also look at debt to revenue as at January up until, I think this is for years, up until 2022. That's what we are looking at, and I know the situation has worsened in 2023. And then now I think the public debt chart over there, I think, is what tells the whole story. And you can see from 2008 progressively debt service as a cost has been getting higher and higher. And I think because this is a month-on-month analysis, and the blue is external debt and the red is domestic debt, and this of course has worsened as time has gone by, coming into this year. I think the numbers we've seen of the latest from the government is that as at April, government spending was at 2.3 trillion. At least that's the cash spending. We don't know if we would be doing accrual spending, what that number would be like, because sometimes government takes on credit. And then we've got tax revenues were at 1.573, and I think an additional 1.573 trillion, an additional maybe 65 billion of non-tax revenues. So that forms the background of what you're looking at. So in summary, We're looking at tightening in money supply. We're looking at inflation sort of being tamed somewhat, but largely because of external factors. Oil prices, I think, have come down, but we're also seeing higher interest rates being driven by two factors. Number one, inflation, concerns on inflation, and number two, just demand from government spending, and of course, jitters by lenders, by investors on government's ability to pay. Fiscal deficit, I think for 2022, 2023 may not be as large, but largely because government has been constrained in spending. And then when you look at total public debt, of course, that's been rising. And I think that's the single largest budget item. I mean, it's a reason for the single largest budget item as that now. I think I'll stop there for now, so that I can let Eric present.
Okay, thanks a lot, F.A. Johnson, for the precise presentation. Can move on to F.A. Musau, who I mentioned is the Executive Director Research, Standard Investment Bank. And because of time, we'll just request that the profiles can be read as we start the panel discussion. F.A. Eric?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think going on. So I think the way I looked at the Finance Bill 2023 was really more of implementing the promises, the campaign promises that the politicians gave during the campaign period of 2022. And as that apt quote goes there, politicians campaign in poetry but govern in prose. It's really about that background that I looked at the finance bill, and it did seem to fit well. Maybe looking back on some of the other years, just before 2023, we've had 2021 and 2022. What happened? And in 2022, we know there was of course the issues around, like the concern around government spending was always there. Of course, we remember after COVID, infrastructure was still key at that particular point. The pressure on debt was still an issue we were continuing to address. And when we did a report then, we could see government spending and debt and tax being big elements that the government had to consider. So there was resistance to tax increases. And so we noticed even in that year, there was very little, in fact, there was actually a temporary reduction of pay as you earn, corporate tax and VAT. So that was the background in 2021. 2022 was an election year. So again, a very challenging period for government. And you can actually see in that year, the report we did was really to show what things government was trying to juggle. Inflation was rising. There's a need to increase taxes, but still very limited increases. Spending was still significant. And that's why we have the subsidies. We had fuel subsidies, fertilizer subsidy, although that time the fertilizer subsidy was just not sufficient. And therefore, even though we had good rains, we just did not have sufficient production during the year. There was also electricity subsidies, as well as the maize to sort of cushion consumers. And I think there was a tax increase, but that came the implementation of PMALI this year, so the capital gains tax, which was really passed in 2022. But at the end of the day, there was still that recognition that unemployment was still a major concern. And we saw also various initiatives just trying to tinker on the edges, the special economic zones, blue economy, vehicle manufacturing, pharmaceutical industries that we've noticed even in 2023. It's an area that government has continued to focus on. So we think that that's something that has informed the guidance. When you look at now this year, and it's one of the key issues really is implementing the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. And when you look at the campaign manifesto, they did promise, the Kenya Kwanza administration did promise to change the tax hierarchy. And with that, they've introduced the 35% income tax band. There was a reduction of monthly rental tax from 10% to 7.5% from 10%. Which was actually a bit of a surprise, but actually quite welcome. Maybe not something probably has been less recognized. It's actually quite important to a majority of rental taxpayers. There's also now a 3% tax on digital assets, and the focus on affordable housing as well as healthcare reform, which now come with its additional levy, which of course is refundable if you do not qualify under the affordable housing scheme. But really, at the end of the day, it was a promise to sort of raise the savings rate, and all these funds in a way raise the savings rate. So that's one of the key issues. On the tax hierarchy, in terms of what the administration had promised, was on taxing consumption. And we've seen VAT and import taxes especially have gone up. Excise duty is now essentially a mainstream tax. Financial services, we've seen the excise tax being consolidated there, both sort of M-Pesa and banking taxes. They've almost now they're now uniform in a way. There was some reductions around the internet taxes, or trying to encourage fiber and so forth, because also that was a campaign pledge to sort of increase access to the internet. I would imagine maybe more internet access across the country. They've been trying to implement that using the Universal Service Fund already in terms of various markets and so forth. Of course, one of the controversial ones is the petroleum one. When you look at it, again, it's an increase from 8 to 16%, and it's something that has been pushed for a long time. Maybe the timing might be less opportune, but there may never be an opportune time. The administration has also promised adoption of electric vehicles. So really, at the end of the day, you cannot advantage petroleum products if the idea is to transition towards electric as much as possible. So I guess we'll be waiting for the budget to see really what push the government is going to give to really get that momentum going, especially for public transportation. LPG, a transition fuel, we've seen that now that's exempt from tax. But again, the impact of that, depending on how it is. But again, if we're going to be getting it from Tanzania, then certainly the cost will be a lot lower. And then in terms of jobs and exports, there was a repeal of the inflation adjustment, especially on excise taxes. I think that's a relief in some way, because that I think at some point had become quite significant. And even with the inflation adjustment, we still had in some cases additional taxes still being imposed. There's now an export promotion levy taxed on imports on products which can be manufactured locally. So I think steel, furniture, clinker, cement and so forth. So again, that speaks a lot towards the sense around being able to have local manufacturing perform in a way by providing, as long as that capacity is there locally. There was a 10% corporate tax on human vaccines. And this was actually a bit surprising, and hopefully they've talked to the main investment here for vaccines is really Moderna. So hopefully they've agreed with Moderna on that. It's a major investment for the continent, and it's coming to the country. So hopefully this is not a distraction, but certainly very important. The other Kenyan entity which is going to be doing this is the Kenya Biovax Institute. So again, very, very high-end industries that are really the focus, being able to attract this human vaccines component. And then there's the tax exemption of exported services. So that was introduced last year, which was very unusual, even though so it's good to see it that it's now been exempted. The other tax measures, a lot of them were really to plug the loopholes, the exemptions here and there, and also to ensure there's no treaty shopping for multinationals. So essentially, it's just closing really all the possible gaps and really being able to address the main agenda. So in a nutshell, I would say that essentially this Finance Bill 2023 should not really come as a surprise when you consider the manifesto. It's really there in black and white, about maybe yellow and white and black, on how the administration is going to take things, and they're implementing it almost to the dot since they came in. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, F.A. Eric. Also, thank you so much, F.A. Margaret, F.A. Nderi. We appreciate your insights in the presentations. Our participants, you're most welcome. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat section. We want to interact as much as possible in this important subject matter. And I like what F.A. Eric was saying, that politicians campaign in poetry, but govern in prose. And as you're saying, it was all in black and white and yellow in a manifesto. So the question is, do we really read manifestos? But anyway, that's a question we can keep pondering on as we proceed. We can start our panel session, and I'll request all our panelists to please just switch on your videos so that we can proceed. And again, I'll encourage all of us to just ask questions. You can type them. You can raise your hand if you want to speak, you're feeling tired of typing. So, as I said, our panelists are very passionate about this subject matter. F.A. Margaret Kibera, a council member. She's also a lecturer at many colleges and universities. We have F.A. Eric Musau, Executive Director Research at Standard Investment Bank, and we have F.A. Nderi, a Manager Corporate Finance and Advisory at ABC Capital, has extensive years of experience in transaction advisory. So we can start our discussion, and I'll start with a big question. Having looked at the Finance Bill 2023, and I like that F.A. Margaret comprehensively highlighted the provisions in the bill, we can start with F.A. Margaret, your views. Was it designed to impact both consumption and production in the Kenyan economy? Or was it just for consumption? Or is it for production? Both? You can tell us, F.A. Margaret, your thoughts. F.A. Margaret, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you very much, F.A. Diana. My thoughts are that actually the bill is for both consumption and production, in the sense that we have seen in some provisions that they're actually encouraging. Okay, for example, number one, they have exemptions on services that are going to be provided that are going to be exported. So that is going to help the ordinary mwananchi to actually produce goods and services to be consumed locally and abroad. Secondly, the other thing that is quite notable is that the government aims at bringing into the fold as many people as it can, people in the tax bracket. And what does this mean? That means many more people will be taxed, and if many more people are going to be taxed, then it means that the government is going to have much more money that it's going to use to spend on social factors like housing. It's going to spend on education. It's going to spend on health, and at the same time, health very crucial because, as we've seen, we have some tax exemptions on intellectual properties. Then we have seen something else that is quite notable: the reduction of tax on rental income from 10% to 7.5%. So what does that mean? That the government is going to collect more money, and of course, as a person who owns houses, I'm going to pay less in terms of taxes. And if I'm going to pay less in terms of taxes, it means that I have more disposable income, and I can be able to buy more goods and services, which is going to stimulate demand. And stimulate demand, and then at the same time, stimulate production. So those are my thoughts on that it's going to stimulate production and consumption. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Sefe Margaret, for your thoughts. Sefe Nderi? Consumption, production?
For me, more or less neither. Let me say why. This government, the first item on its bill is debt repayment. That's what it's going to focus on, and that is what is driving the budget right now. It needs to service the debt, and its cost of debt is getting worse over time, and that's why I think I try to cover the macros just to see where we are coming from and where we are going to. So if you're going to look at it critically, even where we are right now, and I think it was March where we had the chief government economic advisor coming to TV and telling us that March was a choice between paying debt and paying salaries. So that's how bad it was. So. And when you start seeing such signs, for those of us who do credit analysis, and I think I also shared that with in my slides. You saw debt service costs going up. You saw the stock of debt going up faster and faster, and your revenues right now are growing. I think if we look at it critically, last year we were told we will collect between 2.4 to 2.5 trillion Kenya shillings in tax revenues. So far we've done 1.56, and we are at month 10 of the year. So if you compare to the performance of last year, you'll find that the growth mainly can be largely attributed to inflation. The additional taxes that came in last year didn't have too much of an impact in terms of raising revenues, and it's having an impact on the competitiveness of the economy and the ability for it to produce. So when you say, is it for consumption? Consumption already happened. So now we are paying the bill, and that's where additional taxes are required. You can hear the same message. You could hear the same message from the president's interview over the weekend, where you were saying, look, we've got debts to pay and we've got a manifesto to deliver. So we need additional revenues. So if you look at the bill, it's designed to increase revenue generation. First item on the spending bill, what we call the first charge or the consolidated account is debt service, and that's what is top of his mind at this point. So that's so for me it was not really a surprise that it go this direction. I wished he didn't go this direction. I think there are alternative directions, but that was the primary idea behind the Finance Bill 2023.
Okay, thanks, Nderi. Hold that thought on alternatives. We'll get back to that. Eric, your thoughts?
My sense is that under the circumstances, the Finance Bill 2023 is actually well thought out. It doesn't seem to have as many tax increases as one would imagine when you consider the focus. It's mainly import taxes which have gone up. You have the oil tax which has gone up domestically. But that's up from 8%, and it's even didn't start with the current administration. The housing levy, I think the first time it was passed was in 2018. It's clarified in the current element. It's at a much higher level at 3%. And at the end of the day, it increases savings. And if it's not used at 7 years, one can actually withdraw it and put it under pension. So it's really an initiative to raise pension. I think employers would be the ones probably to suffer that significantly, because at the end of the day, they have to match the employee contribution. But in a nutshell, I would say this bill under the circumstances was well thought out. And in the context of the manifesto, it's really in that context that they did the numbers, and they're not too far off the mark.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So for you feel it covers both consumption and production?
I think the target is production. I think the question is which production, because again, the manifesto focuses a lot on farmers. They were to turn the 2 million farmers into surplus producers and ensure they have higher disposable income. Of course, now you now have to look at the focus of the administration is on farming. And then you look at the urban centers, which, of course, are consumers. Of course, they're feeling the pinch under inflation. That's starting to calm down, but there's a high base effect that's already weighing on the urban population. But that's where affordable housing comes in. The employed population, when you think about it, it's just a little bit over 10%. And those are the people paying all this. And it must be a challenge. But really, when you're looking at the overall population, you're looking at 85% of the population, which might not be included in some of the challenges that are of concern. But in the long term, I think strategically, as a country, we had to make some hard choices at some point. Financial markets are a lot more difficult at this time. So one has to really re-engineer the system to get things working.
Okay, great. Thanks for that contribution, Eric. Now on to solutions. Let's talk about solutions, because Nderi has talked about alternatives. Perhaps there could be other areas of improvements to support production ultimately, because that should be the focus. And as financial analysts, we are also financial advisors. So, Margaret, do you feel there are gaps perhaps that could have been that are not present in the bill but could be addressed? Because it's still in undergoing public participation. Do you feel that there are still gaps and alternatives to enhance the finance bill to facilitate production? Starting with Margaret.
Yes, gaps that could facilitate production. So I think maybe I would want to see more of government spending, and at the same time, maybe to see more of tax cutting. Because you see, when we have tax cutting, it means that households and corporates will have more income at their disposal, which means that they can be able to maybe purchase goods and services, which means it's going to stimulate the economy, because they are stimulated, demand is going to be stimulated. So I think what I would want to see is more of government cutting on taxes, and at the same time, more of tax cuts, though. Because we still have a little bit more of because many people are complaining about there are so many taxes in Kenya, and the taxes in Kenya are actually hurting the mwananchi. So what I would want to see is a tax cut on various essential commodities, and we welcome the tax cut or the tax exemption on liquid fuels, but I think we need to see much more on reduction of taxes, and at the same time we need to see more socio-economic programs that are going to help the common mwananchi, because as we know, we have many people who are still living below the poverty line. But we also welcome the thing that the government has done on affordable housing, and actually even asking Kenyans to pay 3% out of their salary. That is welcome. But I think we'd want to see much more on programs that can help the economy grow and grow faster. And at the same time, a reduction in government spending, in terms of that the government should only stick to its budget. So because what has happened is that we see that sometimes we have budgets, we have government officials going to parliament to ask for some extensions in their budget, so that they can be able to spend more. So cutting such kind of things. Then the other thing is sealing in the linkages, that we have many linkages that, of course, we ask for money, we borrow money, but it goes to be used in things that are not very beneficial to the country. So I think, that's what I think I would want to see. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Margaret. Nderi, now we are picking up from what you were talking about, alternatives. What can be done better? You're muted.
Sorry. So let's start from where we are right now, and what is the issue? As we speak, we have serious macroeconomic imbalances, and those imbalances have been driven by deficit spending, historical deficit spending for the longest time. So we've been living beyond our means for at least 10, maybe 15 years. My charts tell me 2008, but some people will argue 2012 with the end of the beginning of the previous administration. However you cut it, we've been living beyond our means, and now the debt is beginning to catch up with us. So the first thing we need to address is the debt, and I don't think there's any way around it. Depending on who you ask, the markets are either screaming amber or red at this point. So but it's so bad. Government is struggling to raise money off of 364 T-bills, and everybody's parking in the 91 T-bills and the occasional bond. Actually, right now, if the government tried to issue a bond of 5 years or longer, it may not get uptick. So it's that bad, and we need to acknowledge things are not okay as we speak. So will additional tax revenues, tax rates, higher tax rates raise revenues? I don't think so. I think we're on the right side of the Laffer curve, and if we continue down this road, government will be tempted to start funding itself via inflation, because as I have tried to explain the last time, the additional tax revenues we saw for between 2021 and 2022 was largely because of inflation, not because of increased economic activity. Factor out inflation, and you get very little additional tax revenues. And I think the president has been on record also talking about it, because he keeps saying, our tax to GDP is not where it ought to be. So you're seeing your GDP growing, but your tax to GDP has been falling. I think maybe turned around maybe in the last 1 or so years. But yeah, those are the dynamics. So the question is, if that is a problem, how do you fix it? So number one, our economy has been losing competitiveness. So if you want to start growing our tax to GDP, we need to refocus our economy. We need to pivot from a government-led economic growth model. I think that has run its course, and because of the deficit spending, policies, and we go back to a private sector-driven economic growth model, where the private sector can access more resources to invest. So, having said that, Eric did touch upon something that I think is very important. He spoke of savings. So you are growing our savings. That's great. I think the only concern I have is where is the savings being directed. So if you look at you're increasing your NHIF, but that's really just to fund healthcare spending. That's not really savings. You're increasing your NSSF, but if you're going to use all those funds to fund government, to fund recurrent expenditure, then that's really consumption you're funding. You're not funding investment, of which really that's what investment is supposed to support. If you are looking at housing fund, again, that's funding investment, but in a sector that in my view, if you wanted to fund, if there's one fund I could probably get behind, is a fund to fund investment in manufacturing. Remember, the government has been saying that we need to increase the component of manufacturing in the economy, and which has been declining over the last few years. And they say the program is called 20 by 30. I think it was a play on the Vision 2030. So, but how do you grow manufacturing and you're taking resources away from manufacturing? I know they say that some of the inputs are going to be from manufacturing and whatnot, but for me, it doesn't ring true, because the manufacturing we should be talking about is the manufacturing that actually goes, not the manufacturing that you're forcing on, but manufacturing that has actual real demand from the economy, as opposed to the one that's been developed via the housing fund, which I think will deplete, because if you look at the structure, they're talking about taking your money and lending it at 5%, which is actually below inflation rate, leave alone the required rate of return. So there'll be some capital consumption there, and it will naturally deplete. So if you ask me, So in a nutshell, what am I saying? I'm saying that I would have loved to see tax cuts so that we can get back our competitiveness. We used to be net exporters to the region. Now the tide is turning. Now we're becoming net importers, and that's not a good signal.
Okay, thank you very much, Nderi. So in your opinion, you feel not much has been done to boost private sector growth?
We are killing it, actually. We keep taking, and at some point, to borrow from Ayn Rand's novel, Atlas will shrug.
Okay.
The assumption is that government, that private sector will always produce regardless of the tax rate, and I think that's not true.
So now that you mentioned the focus is on debt repayment, while you have acknowledged that debt is the issue, maybe as you're holding that thought, you can let us know what are alternatives to cover that debt repayment issue. If Eric, you can proceed with your thoughts. What can be done better? You've already said it's a job well done, but do you still feel there could be enhancements? Already, Nderi has said private sector hasn't been well thought of.
I think we'll know for sure when we start seeing the spending component, because here we are really just talking about the taxation measures. But if you look at the taxation measures, I think essentially it starts to put local manufacturing ahead, because you've already added a bit of barrier on the import side. Of course, when you have challenges with institutions, that can be a major issue. We saw, for example, some sugar which had been condemned, and that sort of found its way into the market. And those are the kind of things at some point which killed our sugar sector. You impose right-meaning taxes, but then you end up with importation which kill our market. And of course, there's also just the issue of competitiveness domestically. I think when we look at the spending bit and the focus that maybe government is going to have is that it's to figure out the special economic zones. I've seen a lot of effort around that, and if those can be utilized, that can be an important channel for growth. Because if you look at Naivasha, it was meant to do a lot of there's access to power, there's affordable land. So some of the big challenges that really manufacturing sector faces, those are the ones. Dongo Kundu, an important area that can even compete with Dubai. It's just a matter of having an enabling environment and getting it going. And now we are seeing a bit of importers there, a bit late in the day, but these are things that were thought out a long time ago. Konza Technopolis, again, we're seeing momentum, but these are things which we would have started seeing the fruits at this time. I think it's to ensure also that government speaks and continues to act in the way it says. So the trust on institutions remains really critical, that institutions given money do not betray the trust of those that have made the contribution, because we've seen in the past, and really at the end of the day, that's one of the key issues. People do not trust our institutions. People do not trust NSSF, at least in prior years. NHIF, they've been institutions riddled with scandals. I think looking at the budget again, there's also an amnesty on interest and penalties. So I think overall it's not bad. It's not well-meaning, but of course the best ideas may well not be implemented well. But I think those are some of the pitfalls that the authorities have to watch out for.
Okay, great, Eric. Thank you for those insights. Do we have any questions from our participants? You can raise your hand, and I feel like I want to rope in. I can see some economists in the House who are also our members. Churchill Ogutu, do you have anything to add in this discussion? Especially on any enhancements, proposals as financial analysts in the finance bill. Churchill Ogutu, you can switch on your microphone.
Hi Diana, hi everyone. Sort of an ambush, but I appreciate what the panelists have been unpacking on to us on the finance bill. Probably I can mention that I think if my overall assessment of the finance bill, it's sort of end product of what you've seen that have been released so far. We have had the tax expenditure report, which basically this is the report of all the foregone revenue. The latest report, which was released in March 2022, was touching on the calendar year 2021, all the revenues that were missed in that particular year. And also there's also the other component of the tax policy, which basically is an overarching theme, matters taxes for the next, I think, 5 or so years. So my assessment of the finance bill, from my view, is that some of the proposals included there are sort of giving to birth all these proposals that have been contained in one tax expenditure report and also the tax policy report. Issues such as the VAT, that increase from 8% to 16% is both on the tax policy, that there'll just be one standard VAT rate, and also on the tax expenditure, because the VAT on fuel was flagged as one of the largest revenue items that the government had forgone. So to me, I think this is that's just one of the issues that came out to me. Also, the issue around pay as you earn, that additional marginal tax band of 35%. That one was also put in place with the national tax policy. But overall, I think that this time around, you could understand where the pressure is coming from. We are at a point whereby the target for this financial year is around 2.19 trillion, and then is expected to go up by 400 billion in the next financial year. So it's like the government was trying to come up with all the tax proposals, at least to affect these two reports, at least to realize that target for the next financial year. But I think they should have read the room, because they're just setting their goals a bit too high, and then they may end up not realizing the targets. We've seen the revenues performance in the current financial year. By all indications is that we are going to have a big miss in tax revenue collection. So at least from that perspective, they should have adjusted even their expectations that potentially the macroeconomic environment or the current environment may not even be supportive of all these tax proposals or a number of the tax proposals that are contained in the finance bill. So I think that might be a challenge in terms of implementation of the finance bill. I know public participation. I don't know what the MPs will tell us once they resume parliament in like 2 weeks' time with that final report on the finance bill. So, but I think there's been a lots of hue and cry that has accompanied this particular finance bill, to the extent that if the parliament or MPs pass it as it is, it might be challenging in the future in terms of the tax revenue collection targets that they have and all that. So this is just top of my head. I did not prepare anything, but just my thinking around the finance bill. But nonetheless, I was just listening into the panelists. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Churchill. You know, you're an economist, so I know you're always prepared for such discussions. Thank you very much for the insightful contribution. Now I can see Sheila Kilonzo is agreeing with Nderi. She's saying when taxes are increased to fund debt repayment, challenges of household food security is going to be compromised. So she's raising the elephant in the room, which is corruption. Yeah. What do you think about this, Margaret? Since you also a proposal of spending there's
Yes,
still an issue of corruption.
Yes, I think maybe what the government needs to do is to actually introduce participatory budgeting, where it involves the citizens and key people in budgeting, so that the citizens can see that there's actually value for money for what they're being taxed for. Yeah, that's what I think. That's my thought, though.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the insights. If in Nderi, as you're picking up from where Margaret left, we asked you some alternatives to help with these debt issues. Maybe you can share your views, your opinions, rather than the tax increments.
Sorry, so I touched on it a bit. I said you want your revenues to grow, not as a result of increased tax rates, but as a result of increased economic, activity. But our what's the economic activity? It's challenging for producers right now. We are uncompetitive. So additional tax rates doesn't make us any more competitive, and in fact, it can put our entrepreneurs out of business, and that means additional spending will probably require imports from the government. And actually, if you do your analysis, you'll find that generally speaking, fiscal deficits actually do drive trade deficits, largely because every time you disadvantage a producer, if consumption is to be maintained, then you'll have to import. So again, I'd rather we cut taxes so that our people can be more competitive, and so that our tax revenues can grow as a result of economic growth, as opposed to as a result of increasing tax rates, which in my view, I don't even think will grow. So that's one. Number two, I think we should start relooking at moving away from debt markets. If we, local debt markets, if we must borrow. In any case, that's where the most expensive debt is. In fact, I'm not so worried about our external debt. I'm more worried about our internal debt. That's where our pressure is coming from. And number three, and here I'll go against my very good colleague Margaret. I actually think we should start cutting spending. It's the spending that got us here in the first place, through deficit spending. And the reason it was deficit spending is because we couldn't raise enough taxes to support the government spending. So we should cut tax spending so that resources can be available to private sector for investment and for also their own consumption, because the living standards, generally speaking, have not been great, especially in the last few years.
Okay, thanks for that, Nderi. Eric, do you agree we cut on spending?
Well, it's a big challenge, and I think also this is an issue that is that's normally pushed by the citizens. Kenyans love infrastructure. When politicians go somewhere, it's either a school, it's a road. People want to see physical things, and we know even during the administration of the county governments, most of them focused on infrastructure and forgot the software. I don't know that the current government, at least in their manifesto, they've promised to ease off on infrastructure, and I think I did hear comments by the Minister for Infrastructure, Murkomen, mentioning that they're not going to do new roads. I don't know that that's completely correct, or they're still going to have an increase, and that's why it's very challenging from a political standpoint. And the MPs can also not hide blaming the infrastructure, and at the same time blaming the spending size, and at the same time not pointing out where the spending can actually be practically cut out, because that's really one of the key issues, that there are key shortages. If you look at the last 10 years, the Jubilee administration, both the 10 years, they did a lot of work in the infrastructure side, as well as electricity and so forth. And of course, that's when the repayments of some of the Kibaki loans started coming through. And now you're faced with a scenario where, the scenario is markets are not as accommodating as they used to be. So certainly there's need to moderate. I think if the spending can grow at a much lower pace than the collection, so that at least in a couple of years we now narrow that gap, then that might be a much more palatable mechanism. And obviously the current administration is taking these decisions because closer to the election, it might be more difficult to take difficult decisions. So they probably want to front load a lot of the pain up front, and then be able to at least ease off things towards the next general election. I think another tax that maybe has not been mentioned is the one on land. Because essentially rent seeking and land, those are also important components, and having the county revenues, county governments also being able to collect taxes on their own. So there are things that can be done, but they're not necessarily easy there. We need political goodwill.
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions. Apologies for going over time, but we are wrapping up, I believe, in the next 5 minutes. But we have noted your comment, Kenneth. We will plan to work with Kibra and also work with APSEA on how we can partner and drive such discussions. So parting shot, we can start with Margaret. You can tell us your parting shot concerning the Finance Bill 2023 and the role as financial analysts we can play to advise the government in such important policy decisions. Margaret.
Thank you very much, Diana. My parting shot would be my parting shot will actually be to encourage the government to actually seek professionals in the field of finance and economics, so that they're able to coordinate or marry the monetary policies and the physical policies together in such a way that they are going to be of benefit to the economy, in such a way that we can have a balance between spending and taxes, and at the same time, taxes being used to fund expenditures that are meant to bring about economic growth. Because I can tell you, Diana, once taxes, when citizens are taxed, and then we can see that there is value for money for whatever is being provided in terms of we are being taxed for such a kind of things, then we see that the government has actually come up with projects that they had promised, and at the same time we don't have leakages. Then it means the economy can grow because we have used the physical policies, we've used the monetary policies to actually bring about economic growth, to bring down inflationary pressures, to bring down interest rates. And we have many people who are coming out, or SMEs coming out to do what? To actually borrow some loans, and they can be able to expand their businesses by employing people. And in that way, the economy grows. So that's my parting shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Nderi, your parting shot.
Thank you, Diana. I think I left out one of the alternatives, but largely because I think government is already pursuing it anyway. Is to bring down their debts down to manageable levels. I think they've been talking about privatization, which as a industry we are front and center of that business. So that could be a very good way to cut down government spending. But also we need to be careful. We're being stabbed slowly, because the more the government taxes, the less we save, and the less we save, the less financing there is for investment, which again so savings is one of our lifebloods. So we need to guard that jealously. And if you look at our savings rates, historically they've been coming down. So we need to lobby so that we can start seeing savings as a proportion of GDP going up, so that our entrepreneurs can be funded, so that we can have investments that can grow the economy.
Thanks, Nderi. Eric, your parting shot.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for being part of this esteemed panel. I think for me is to say that maybe we should continue putting, at least as a profession, play our role to ensure that we are well embedded in the implementation of various finance initiatives in the country, including government projects. Because you remember, accountants, for example, have embedded themselves very, very, very clearly in the areas that they need to work. On the investment side, the ICIFA financial analyst should be well embedded on the project side to ensure that as the profession grows, we were able to play a much bigger role. Obviously, we're going to see a lot more activity on the PPP space. So I'm quite confident on the future of this country. I think we are facing some significant challenges, but I think all is not lost. I think it's in such challenging times that we can really get the best out of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Just before we wrap up, because I can see there's a question here, we just want to close with it. But I remember Nderi saying he's not concerned much about external debt, it's more domestic. But there's a question here if it seems to be another vicious cycle of debts, given that the IMF loans seem to be increasing. And could there be conditions for the tax increases based on these loans? This is a question for you, Nderi, from Dawn.
I always keep forgetting to unmute. Apologies. I think this, when the government went in, they found an IMF program, and obviously they will require that the government works within certain guidelines, given that they have disbursed. Now, IMF is not your typical lender. IMF is a quote-unquote crisis lender, and when they're lending to you, it's not business as usual. So certainly, like Don asks, is IMF involved? I think they are, but you can, like the other two panelists have observed, you can clearly see the manifesto being brought out in the finance bill. I think the two influences are there.
Okay, thank you very much, Nderi, Margaret, Eric. We truly appreciate your insights. This is a hot topic. I wish we could go on and on. People have been watching keenly, but we had circulated a call for comments in the finance bill so that we can submit as ICIFA. We have a key role. We are the voice of the industry, of the professionals. So please submit your comments by tomorrow, because I think the public participation is ending on 20th. So kindly submit your comments. Even our expert panelists, we invite you all to participate. We look forward to seeing you in our other events. So have a good night, and God bless you all. Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.